like rotators that mages get. So that's the standardization of rank 3. The next thing is the standardization of prestige classes and specializations. Now, if you don't know the difference between these two, I'll explain it. A prestige class is a class that you put a rank into, and then you get abilities, and it's not one of the usual ones. Monks are a good example of a prestige class. You put a rank into that, and then you have these new abilities. But a specialization is a little bit different. A specialization is where you just have to be like certain classes and then do some special training, and then you get a certain ability. Good examples of specializations are like the Harper's Guild. They don't have a special rank that you put into that to be in the Harper's Guild. You have to just do certain training, do singing in front of people, that sort of thing. And then if you've done it, now you gain certain powers or abilities. But we're going to standardize this, which means that if you do a specialization, you only be able to get one inability and one out ability for each rank of specialization that you have. Now, if the specialization requires you to be like 3 different ranks of 3 different things, well, then it could have 3 different abilities that you're getting, because each rank that you are in that specialization allows you to get one ability, one in and one out, potentially. So that's the difference between a prestige class and a specialization. Now, they're both being standardized. What that means is that all prestige classes are going to follow a very specific outline, which looks very much like the monks. If you're familiar with how monk looks in his outlay, that's the basic template that we're using. And so all the prestige classes that we have are all going to follow that template. And all the specializations that we have are going to follow the template of one in and one out. That means that old abilities that you had may not be available to you anymore. If you were like a rune weaver, a rune singer, art mage, all these specialization of classes, all that's going to be revised. And we have lots of different people working on the revisions right now. And if you were in that class, then you're invited to help with the revision. So if you have a rune mage, or you have a somebody who was in like the Gramian Guard or something like that, then you're invited to help people create the new version that you would like, that thinks the best. And then those will be submitted, and we'll pick the one we think is the best for that class. So the link to see what that prestige class and the specializations, what that formula looks like and how to do it, they all have to have flaws. The more flaws a prestige class or a specialization has, the more powerful it can be, the more abilities it can get. And there's a ratio we use, which is based off of our old build chart, and you can look that up in the old Adult League if you want. It's out of date, but it gives you the basics. And you can see basically how that works, how much build a rank 1 ability is as opposed to a rank 2 ability, or as opposed to like a custom ability that nobody even knows about. Those are all different build points that you get for those. And the more flaws you add to a class, the more build you get, and then therefore the more build you have to spend on your classes. All right, so that's the standardization of prestige classes and specializations. Moving on, there's a couple things we need to work on to keep people remembering to do things that often they forget to do. One of those is like pulling from the death bag. We're changing pulling from the death bag in 2 ways. First, the death bag is going to be increased a great deal in how easy it is to get divine intervention. The death bag is now going to have 10 red stones, 20 clear stones, and then the 3 black stones for a total of 33 stones. What this means is that the odds of getting divine intervention are way higher. I mean, all you need is 1 red stone and you've got divine intervention. But the number of red stones you get determines kind of the power or lasting effect of that divine intervention, multiplied by your connection with your deity. So if I have no connection with my deity, and I get maybe 1 red stone, well, then my divine intervention is very, very weak. I may only live another month, and that's it for me. If I get like 7 red stones or something, and I have 3 black stones, and I have no connection to my deity, well, then I might get a more standard, divine intervention. Because I got a lot of red stones there. Now, if I got like 7 red stones and I have a really strong connection with my deity, well, then I might get some really epic, a divine intervention, and it'll last like indefinitely. So that's just a change we're making to make it much easier for GMs to not tie up the death bag when somebody suddenly needs to be someone about to PD. We don't have to pull extra stones and talk to the GM and get all that worked out. They can just know immediately, I got no red stones, I'm done. Or I got 1, I'm good, I'll talk to the GM later. So that's one fix. The other fix is that you now have to pull from the death bag after every mission. That means that when you go off on a mission, we do the mission and all that, when you get back to town, everybody on the mission has to pull who died, and they have to go do that before they can be in the inn. So you aren't allowed to go into the inn and like vote on missions or anything until you've pulled from the death bag. And so have to go through and queue up and then do that, and then that's all another reason why we need to know if you've got divine intervention or not, and not talk to the GM, because the GM will probably be running town and they won't be able to do your divine intervention right then. So that's also going to increase the chances of PD. So by adding more redstones, we kind of compensate for that. So that's one change. Another change is Insanities. A lot of things like Insanity is sometimes hard to remember for some people. They don't remember that they have an Insanity. Also, Insanities are sometimes hard for people to know how to roleplay them, what to do with them. So we're going to add little cards that you can get, kind of like the Blessing, Pact, Familiar, those types of cards. And it'll say which your Insanity is, the type it is, how to roleplay it. And it'll have different levels of severity. So, a more minor Insanity can be cured by a level 11 mage with pure Insanities. A more moderate one is going to be, takes level 21 to cure, and they also need to have that life rotator spell. And then a severe one needs like a level 31 mage to do it, and they have to have that spell. And then there's also might be custom ones that GMs just write up by hand. But most of them will be handed out. We're hoping to have, over time, as we make more, have a big collection of them that we can just pass out, and people can have them. And that way, people may not even know what your Insanity is because nobody hears it. I can just pass you a card, and you can be like, "Oh, this is my Insanity, whoa!" And then start acting that way, and it makes a lot more role playing, a lot more fun in the game, I think. So I'm really looking forward to that. Might do the same thing with divine intervention. We might start using cards for that too, so you can be looking for that. And curses. We also might have curse cards that you can have, and I can pass them out that way, so people don't know what your curse is. You just have a card, and you can then read it, and then be like, "Oh, okay, I have this curse," and then people can wonder what it was. So it adds a lot more mystery to the game. I think something that's kind of gets lost a little bit in the time that we create. A lot as the game gets bigger, it's harder to manage all the little mysteries. So we're trying to make sure we keep those. All right, so a few other things, and then we're getting close to the end. So some keywords you might run into: nullify and cancel. You might run into these words now. Nullify is just a word for like disable, but it can disable things that normally disable can't. Like it can disable animal abilities, that sort of thing. So if you hear the word nullify, it means like that thing's turned off. And if you hear the word like cancel, that might mean that something's been like dispelled or avoided, but it could do anything. So if somebody says I cancel that, if an item or a power that they have says I can cancel things, then that means it doesn't care about whether it can normally be dispelled or avoided. This one works against that thing. So that's just a keyword to look for. Holdings and buildings. We have a whole chart for how to make cities and towns and ballistas and ships and all this stuff. And if you want to make all that, there's all fiddly little ways to make it all just very detailed. But we wanted a much more smooth system, so we created a list of just the basics, like what does an entire city cost, what does a castle with a moat and all that cost. And if you want to build that stuff and add it to the world and all that, you have to do it during your time jump. You can't do it in the middle of the year. It takes up way too much time. But you should just save up your money for the time jump. When time jump comes around, spend it on your time jump, and then at the end of that time jump, you may then have a city or a town that's there that's now functioning that you were funded or whatnot. So that's the time to build stuff. Don't do it in the middle of the year. It's not going to happen. Familiar. We cleaned up familiar a little bit. I really like what we did for the familiar this year. We added a lot of new, more flavor to familiar. But this one thing it took a lot of time to write it up because it's a rank 1 ability, and so it occurs a lot. So what we're doing is going back to the familiar where with rank 1 it's really just the 1 ability like it used to be, and then when you get Wildborn, if you pick that as your rotator, Wildborn, that's when you get enhanced familiar. Also, that's the one that'll expand your familiar and all that. Another thing we're encouraging people to do is to pick another player to role play your familiar. A lot of familiars have a lot of character, and they're really fun to do encounters with and all that, but it's hard for the GM to do all that. So if you pick a character who you say, hey, will you play my familiar for me, and then you tell them all about it, and then they can talk to the GM and say, oh, I'm playing so-and-so's familiar. can you give me some details about what I should play it? And then I can give you a few ideas, and then you can just run with it. It's a really fun, create some really interesting encounters and all that sort of thing. Now, by this, I don't mean necessarily in an encounter, like you're not necessarily supposed to be someone's familiar in the encounter, like attacking things. I mean more like the role playing of it, because usually familiars don't appear in encounters that way. All right, pacifism. Pacifism is an ability we've had in the game a long time, and we've had some issues with it being how to balance it and all that. We think we've come up with a way to make it nice for combat. We tested it a lot this year, and so we'll be testing it this month to make sure this new version is solid. And if so, we'll keep it. If not, we'll let it go. But pacifism in the game is actually a spell or power that's usually on someone. It's a divine ability, and it gives them certain protections as long as they follow certain rules. So pacifism now is a vow. So you take a vow of pacifism, and then if you're able to get this power on you from some divinity, if they bless you with pacifism, then you're expected to have taken this vow. And as long as you keep the vow, then you keep the protections. And the vows are that you can't deal damage to anything, and you can't kill anything. And as long as you keep those vows, then the damage that would be dealt to you instead just knocks you back. You just take knockback 3. And as long as you keep that vow, then if you would be killed, if something would kill you, like a death ray, instead of that, you just take knockout and you pass out. These are resistances. So if someone wards something, they can still go right through your resistances. Also, if for some reason you can't take the other effect, like if I'm taking damage and I'm supposed to take knockback, but I have, say, shimmering, which says I'm resistant to knockback. I can't be knocked back. Well, then I just take the damage, and then I'm wounded because I can't take the knockback. So if I was like resistant to knockout, for example, like I had adrenaline, and then somebody death rays me, I just die because I can't be knocked out. So be careful of those situations. A couple other things is if you break this vow, it's very serious. If you break the vow that you've made, your character gets a thin soul because they're considered to be dishonored. And they also lose all their defenses that they've gained from pacifism. However, they have taken a vow that they can't deal damage or kill anything, and they have to keep that vow. So because of that, they then have to go on a journey, usually some kind of penance, to like make amends with their deity, and fix their thin soul for one, and then get their defenses back. On that quest, they're not allowed to deal any damage or kill anything. If they do, they have to restart the quest. So that's something to be careful of, is don't break your vow of pacifism, or you will be left defenseless for a very long time until you can do this special quest to get your power.